I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving. A 4-year-old boy was asked to pray before Thanksgiving dinner. He and his family bowed their heads. He began his prayer, thanking God for all his friends, naming them one by one. Then he thanked God for Mommy, Daddy, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, all his aunts and uncles, and his cousins. Then he began to thank God for the food. He gave thanks for the turkey, the dressing, the fruit salad, the cranberry sauce, the pies, the cakes, even the Cool Whip. Then he paused, and everyone waited and waited. After a long silence, the young fellow looked up at his mom and asked, "If I thank God for the broccoli, won't he know that I'm lying?" Another 4-year-old was asked if she liked her Thanksgiving dinner. She said, "I didn't like the turkey much, but I sure loved the bread it ate." By now, you're probably already tired of turkey sandwiches and eating leftovers. I believe it was Irma Bombeck who said that the most remarkable thing about her mother is that for 30 years, she served the family nothing but leftovers. The original meal has never been found. Today, we shift our focus from Thanksgiving to Advent as we look toward Christmas. The Advent series we begin today is inspired by Reverend Matt Rawls' The Heart That Grew Three Sizes, finding faith in the story of the Grinch. Ted Geisel, also known as Dr. Seuss, wrote the children's book How the Grinch Stole Christmas in 1957. Geisel also worked on the animated TV version in 1966. Perhaps the most famous song Dr. Seuss wrote was "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch." Boris Karloff did the narration. Then in 2000, Jim Carrey starred as the Grinch in the movie. Do you remember the story of the Grinch? In the story, the Grinch lives on Mount Crumpet, far above the valley below, where the Whos live in Whoville. Christmas is approaching, and the Grinch hates Christmas. We're not told exactly why the Grinch hates Christmas. Maybe his shoes are too tight or his heart is 2 sizes too small. Whatever the reason, the Grinch decides to stop Christmas from happening. He disguises himself as Santa, and with his dog Max dressed as a reindeer, he pulls his sled into Whoville in the middle of the night on Christmas Eve. He steals all the Christmas presents, all the decorations, and all the food in Whoville. He loads it all in his sleigh and drives his reindeer, poor Max, back up the mountain to the garbage dump. Christmas morning is dawning as the Grinch gets ready to dump all of it in the garbage dump. He listens for wailing and weeping to come from Whoville, since he has stolen Christmas and stopped it from happening. He listens. He hears sounds, but it's all the Whos in Whoville singing. The Grinch is shocked and baffled. Then he suddenly realizes that Christmas cannot be about all the presents and decorations and food, because the Whos in Whoville don't have any of that. Christmas must be about something more. In an instant, his heart grows 3 sizes. He returns all the Christmas presents and food and decorations to Whoville and joins in the Christmas celebration. Is there anything about Christmas that you hate? Geisel admitted his creation of the Grinch was somewhat autobiographical. His disdain for the commercialism of Christmas and his discouragement at his wife's failing health were underneath his writing. We have expectations about Christmas, about life in general. When you're struggling through difficult times, it's hard to hear people saying, "It's the most wonderful time of the year." Maybe you don't like some of the Christmas music, like Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. Not one of my wife's favorites, but I like it. Perhaps you hate Christmas fruitcake or the holiday traffic. Maybe it's the poor service. With the shortage of workers, that may only get worse this year. Did you hear about the woman during her Christmas shopping who walked up to the manager of a department store and asked, "Are you hiring any help?" No, he said, we already have all the staff we need. Good, she said. Then would you mind getting someone to wait on me? That woman's experience reminds me of a man who stopped at a tiny diner and asked for a cup of coffee with cream and sugar. He was rather annoyed that the waitress forgot to bring a spoon with his coffee. After trying unsuccessfully to get the waitress's attention, he announced in a loud voice, "This coffee is pretty hot to stir with my fingers." Within seconds, the waitress appeared with another cup of coffee. "This coffee isn't quite as hot, sir," she beamed. I admit I agree with Geisel. I cringe when I hear someone say, "We cannot afford Christmas," or "We bought the kids Christmas." That's just the way the Grinch thought. You cannot buy Christmas. Christmas means the birth of Christ. It's free, it's not for sale. Expectations, the Grinch had them, we all do. And sometimes our expectations set us up for disappointment or worse. Our expectations are based on our assumptions about life. In the Gospel of Matthew, the story of Joseph has always intrigued me. I try to put myself in his sandals. He finds out that Mary is pregnant. They're about to be married. They're already legally bound together. How could she be unfaithful to him? He thought she was in love with him. She obviously loves someone else more. How could she do this to him? How could she cheat on him? I imagine he wrestled for many sleepless nights trying to decide what to do. Should he keep it secret and marry her anyway, letting everyone think the child was his own? No, that would be dishonest. Besides, the child is not his. Forget Mary. There are other women who would be glad to marry him. Should he bring her before the town elders? She deserves to be humiliated for her unfaithfulness. They may stone her. That's what she deserves. But Joseph still cares about her. I imagine Joseph sitting down telling his mother and father that he's discovered that Mary is pregnant. Imagine their anger with Mary. All of their expectations for having a nice wedding and enjoying grandchildren have been ruined. How could she hurt and dishonor their son this way? Joseph's dream of getting married and having a son of his own are dashed. Mary will have a son, but it will not be his. So Joseph finally decides the right thing to do is simply to divorce Mary, not to make it public, even though everyone will find out anyway. As soon as he's made up his mind to do this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." All of Joseph's anger and frustration at what has happened gets turned upside down, and his heart grows 3 sizes as he realizes this pregnancy is not what he thought. It is the work of God. The dream that Joseph had for having a son of his own is replaced by something different, raising God's son for the sake of humanity. There may be lots of ways that our expectations are not met at Christmas. There may be many ways we've been disappointed by God. Others may have ruined our Christmas. But then our expectations may be misplaced or twisted in a way that the Lord needs to address. God is always working to bring good out of bad, even out of our wrong-headed expectations. One way our assumptions and expectations may need to change is how we see ourselves and others. We're sometimes disappointed with the way things turn out in life. They don't always go the way we would like them to go. In the movie It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey, played by Jimmy Stewart, is ready to end it all by jumping off the bridge. Why? Because he has failed. Throughout the film, George sees himself as a failure because he never left Bedford Falls, traveled the world, or achieved his dreams. His guardian angel, Clarence, helps him see what the town would have been like had George not been born. By staying home, he improved the lives of many people, and in doing so, made lots of friends. And in the end, George sees that his life is wonderful. But sometimes people get stuck in that place or they don't see how important they are to God or to others. Perhaps you are there. Perhaps you feel worthless or that you don't matter. In the 2000 version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, we're given a backstory as to why the Grinch hates Christmas. Kids made fun of him and his Christmas gift in school. They excluded him and rejected him, which led him to live by himself in a cave up on the mountain far away from the town. His hatred for all the Who's in Whoville festered for years, but especially his hatred for their celebration of Christmas. When we are shamed or mistreated, we usually follow one of our base instincts to fight or to flee or to freeze. Sometimes we need a paradigm shift, an attitude adjustment. Christmas is about a paradigm shift. God helps us set aside our expectations, which are often unrealistic and focused on the wrong things. Instead, we look at the great gift that God has given us in Christ. We all need paradigm shifts. That is a point that Stephen Covey makes in his best-selling book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Covey tells about an experience he had one Sunday morning on a subway in New York. People were sitting quietly, some reading newspapers, some lost in thought, some resting with their eyes closed. It was a calm, peaceful scene. Then suddenly, a man and his children entered the subway car. The children were so loud and rambunctious that instantly the whole climate changed. The man sat down next to Covey and closed his eyes, apparently oblivious to the situation. The children were yelling back and forth, throwing things, even grabbing people's papers. It was very disturbing, and yet the man sitting next to Covey did nothing. Covey was irritated. He could not believe that the man was so insensitive as to let his children run wild like that and do nothing about it. The father was taking no responsibility at all. The other people on the subway felt irritated too. Finally, Covey turned to the man and said, "Sir, your children are really disturbing a lot of people. I wonder if you couldn't control them a little more." The man looked up like he had come out of a daze and said softly, "Oh, you're right. I guess I should do something about it. We just came from the hospital where their mother died about an hour ago. I don't know what to think, and I guess they don't know how to handle it either." Covey uses that to show the paradigm shift that immediately occurred in his thinking about that man and his children. Suddenly, he felt sympathy and compassion for that family. He said, "Your wife just died? Oh, I'm sorry. Can you tell me about it? What can I do to help?" Covey said everything changed in an instant. The Grinch hated Christmas and wanted to prevent it from happening. In the story of the Grinch, when he hears the singing of the Who's in Whoville on Christmas morning, he realizes that he has been wrong. His perspective has been out of whack, and his heart is changed. As Rawls points out, the Grinch helps us see the need to evaluate our own expectations of the coming of Christ. The birth of God's Son to a poor Galilean woman was not what anyone expected. Her laying him in a manger was not expected either. And yet the manger is the throne of God, and it is disarming. We hear that the Messiah will be the Lord of Lords and Prince of Peace, and he shall reign forever and ever. And then, like the shepherds, we find a child wrapped in swaddling clothes and are amazed and totally disarmed. Stanley Hauerwas writes, "To be human is to be vulnerable, but to be a baby is to be vulnerable in a manner we spend a lifetime denying." When I was in elementary school, we visited Santa Claus Land in Santa Claus, Indiana. I remember sitting on the lap of Santa Claus and asking for a big red fire truck. Of course, I did not tell my parents. I saw no need for that. I told Santa. So I did not receive the big red fire truck. It was after that some of my expectations and understandings of Christmas began to change. Could it be that all of us, even as adults, still need to change our expectations about Christmas? Christmas is not something we can buy. It's not something we can own. It's not something we can achieve. Christmas is something that we can only receive, the gift of God, which fills us with love, joy, hope, and peace. Receiving Christ in our hearts makes our hearts grow 3 sizes. Thanks be to God.